Hey, thanks for joining us in Moving Conversations. Before we get on with the show, listen, I want to remind you that I'm going to be in Scottsdale, Arizona on April 12th and 13th with my post-rehab summit. So if you're at all interested in learning more about post-rehabilitation, low back pain, knee pain, hip pain, shoulder pain, all that kind of stuff, how to manage clients with those type of conditions, that's really the best place to find some great practical application on all of that. So Post-Rehab Summit, if you go to the website, thefirmbodypilates.com and hit the tab in the upper right-hand corner that says Post-Rehab Summit, that's where all the information is. Check it out, and I hope to see you all there. And now, on to the show. Welcome to Moving Conversations, a podcast for movement professionals by movement professionals. If you coach, train, or teach movement, Pilates, or fitness, then this podcast is for you. With more than 60 years of experience in fitness and Pilates, your hosts, Brian Ritchie and Nora St. John, explore the science of human movement, diving deep into the facts, myths, and common misconceptions, hoping to spark thought and conversation about how we view fitness and movement. Now, let's jump into Moving Conversations. And welcome back to Moving Conversations. This is Brian Ritchie. Joining me as always is Nora St. John. Good morning, Nora. How are you doing?
Doing really well. I am in between AMP teachings. I just taught a lower body in Southern California, and I'm about to go back to Southern California and teach a low back in Chinese for some of our Chinese expat students.
Very cool.
Super exciting. Yeah. It was a great group. Yeah, great group last weekend. A lot of interesting things came up. So I've got some, as they said, I now have some more marching orders of things that I'm going to be working on. So that was super exciting, actually. It's just really nice. Being in LA, it was raining, which was weird and quite lovely. So how about you?
Doing good. It's been snowing the last 24 hours and a little hairy coming in this morning to the office, but hopefully everything will be cleared by the time I leave, and we're expecting some rain, and it's going to warm up tomorrow. So hopefully everything will get washed away and everything will be nice and fresh and clean. And I'm looking forward to the warmth, I got to tell you. So it's not going to stay warm, but a couple of days of 50s will be nice. It'll be nice.
Enjoy it while you can, as they say.
Exactly. And today, you and I were talking probably a month ago about doing an update to our GLP-1 medications that we did last year, right around February. And it's funny, you and I were both talking earlier and said, then this was brand new, cutting edge. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
People had only been on it for, maybe 6 months. And now it seems to be everywhere. And so we thought, why don't we do an update? Because there has been a lot of information, a lot of new information that's come out since then, and a lot of interesting facts. So I figure, let's do a little bit of an update and see where that sort of takes us. So we're going to get to that in just a minute. Do us a favor, hit the like and subscribe button on your platform of your choice. We'd really appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a share, give us a comment, all of those goodness. We'd appreciate it as always. And you can always reach us at movingcombos@gmail.com, as well as through DM, through Instagram at Moving Combos, and Facebook, Moving Conversations. Those are our social media things. And if you forget and we don't say it enough, hey, you can always check it out in the description. It's all listed right there. So now with that behind us, let's talk about GLP-1s and what they are. Again, do a fresh little reminder about what they are, how they work, and whatnot, and we'll go from there.
So let's start. I'm a little background. Brian is more up on this than I am, so I'm going to be a little bit of the guider, but he's going to be the content man mostly today. So GLP-1s, right? This is this massive revolution in weight loss drugs that has happened, and really, they literally broke onto the scene maybe 2 years ago. Suddenly, like a thing,
something like that.
And now something like 10% of Americans are on it, was one statistic I heard the other day.
Wow.
So there's one thing about that is, number one, we have a much, much bigger data set of side effects, of how people are responding to this than we did the last time we did this, which is only like a year ago.
Yeah.
And so we just wanted to really update that. And particularly those of us in the fitness industry, which we all are, I imagine you all have clients who are on these or thinking about going on these or asking you about them. So we just wanted you to have some information that you can either share or pass on, and see what what information we have that may be helpful to you. And I know Brian's had a lot of experience with a lot of different clients with it, so he can give you some personal feedback.
Yeah. So what it is basically is glucagon-like peptide, the GLP-1. It's a hormone that helps to regulate blood sugar. And technically the drugs that are out are called GLP-1 RAs. So they're receptor and agonists. Okay. So they help to mimic that GLP-1, and originally created to treat type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And I got to say, years and years ago, one of the first ones of these came out. I was actually told by a doctor a little bit about it, but the price and the cost was through the roof. And the only people that could get it were people who had a relatively high A1C, who were definitely diabetic. So there wasn't even a thought of using it for obesity. It was not even thought of. And this was before Ozempic and whatnot. Ozempic was really the first one to come out and really sort of target a little bit more of the mass population, I want to say. And to make it known that, hey, guess what? We're seeing some side effects here of a lot of weight loss, and it's doing some good stuff. So really what it's doing is it helps to stimulate insulin secretion. Okay, when glucose is present. So when we eat, we get blood glucose rises. This helps to secrete insulin. So people who are glucose intolerant, it helps a lot with that. So increases that secretion, inhibits glucagon secretion, and really slows gastric emptying. Okay, and also acts as a neurotransmitter in the brain. Now, those are important because that helps to reduce appetite. And when I say it reduces appetite, I am not kidding. Now, I have not tried it. I've thought about, just trying it just to see what it would feel like. Just because, the scientist in me is like, I'm kind of curious. But I can tell you from all of the clients who have been on it, my gosh, it's as though their hunger switch is completely turned off. People who have never missed a meal in their life, have never been able to walk by a candy dish without taking a handful, never walked by the refrigerator without eating something. They just say, I don't ever think about food now. I have to remind myself to eat. It's been a day and I realized I didn't eat yesterday. I was busy at work and I just never ate. And these are people who would never have said this before. So it really does reduce that gastric emptying, so the food stays in your stomach longer. And the neurotransmitter effect in your brain that tells you you're full, it is seems like it's always turned on, that you're not full, don't eat anymore. You're not full, don't eat anymore. So that I found very, very fascinating, because there are a lot of drugs out there, Belvique and Contrave, that had come out for a long time and were really designed as appetite suppressants. And this is really the first that sort of shows, my gosh, this works. This
fulfilled the promise, as it will. Yeah, actually said, yes, actually this does suppress your appetite.
Yeah. And when it talks about gastric emptying, the fascinating thing is doctors are finding before going into surgery. Well, you know how they tell you you're supposed to fast for 8 hours before surgery.
Right.
They were seeing that there was still food in, before, especially endoscopies. They were finding, well, there's still food in the stomach, so we can't do the surgery. And they were finding that they had to tell people to fast for well over 24 hours or to stop the drug the week before, because it's a weekly injectable, to not take it this week and still give 24 hours to really let the emptying occur, because stomach was staying in the stomach. Food was staying in the stomach. So that is really a fascinating sort of effect of this.
Yowza. So from our perspective, there's a bunch of things that I think are important. One is this does, this changes the brain clearly. And in some ways they're thinking that's a lot of what it does, is the change in the brain, that there's all the other components, but the change in the brain seems to be big. I was listening to a podcast the other day and they were talking about using this for basically any kind of addiction, because they were noting, and again, as another side effect, that people who were, let's say, addicted to gambling or had other kinds of drug addictions and alcohol addictions, like those, they said they just lost their need for that, which is pretty profound. Because if you look at all the addictions, not just obesity, but you look at alcohol and drugs, et cetera, those cost a huge amount of money for America every year in terms of medical costs, in terms of lost productivity, and in terms of just sort of tragedy. So it's really interesting that also it's really being looked at by people in the addiction community as something for that community as well.
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
So I was looking at some of the research, and the only one that's really come out so far has been on alcoholism. That's the one that is leading the way. But all these other studies are going to be coming out very, very soon if they're not out, at the moment, that I just didn't see them. But you're right. All the different types of addictions, it seems to be changing the way the brain treats addiction.
Yeah, which is wild.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about an amazing side effect.
Talk about a potentially positive side effect.
Exactly.
Because actually all of this was a side effect, right? I mean, this was basically designed to kind of moderate glucose levels and insulin levels. And that's what it was originally for. And then, oh, by the way, weight loss. Oh, by the way, lack of cravings. So it's one of those, off-label, as they would have called it early on, like off-label uses for a drug that turn out to be possibly its primary function. And I think this will be its primary function going forward.
And a lot of other types of health concerns they're looking at trying to treat this. I just saw that sleep apnea. There's a study on sleep apnea and it's not just the weight loss, because that was the first thing I was talking with my wife, and she said, well, is it because the person lost a lot of weight? It says it seems to be not just that, because if the effect takes place relatively quickly, obviously people aren't losing 75 pounds in a week. So when the effects seem to be within the first few weeks or first month or two, that can be significant. And the study that was coming out was basically talking about how the Mounjaro and Zepbound were the two that were really being looked at that. And that if that is the case, if that can be used as a treatment option, I don't know if you've ever tried to sleep with a CPAP machine or slept next to someone with a CPAP machine, but they can be miserable. I tried it for a little while and I just said, take this damn thing off of me. I had to do it for 6 months and it is horrible.
Yeah, I know my father-in-law had one, and a couple of friends of mine have had them, and it's like they just suffer because they do feel better, but the noise, and then as their partner, those things are not that quiet. So if you're noise sensitive at all, and you're sleeping with somebody who's doing that, you're like, there's the noise, and there's just
sleeping next to Darth Vader. It really is.
Well, there's that too.
Because you're hearing that the whole night long. You can hear that air being sucked in and out, and yes, you can get used to it. It can, I guess, become white noise for some people, but man, it's horrific. So if that could be another off-label use, they're looking at it for kidney disease, that people are seeing that there might be some positive effect with that. With certain types of cancer, people are looking at that, obesity-related cancer, so they're talking about. But all of these things seem to be possible, like you said, off-label uses and positive side effects. Now, remember, there are some negative side effects to going on these. We're not talking about this is one of these things like taking, an aspirin or a Tylenol that you think, oh, you take it and you're not going to feel anything. There are some pretty significant side effects that some people feel.
So let's go down the negative pathway for a moment. So I mean, one thing very simply is that when people go on these, they feel significantly different. Sometimes it's sort of mental, emotional issues that people kind of have with it. A lot of times there's physical issues people have with it. I mean, the stomach not emptying for 24, 48 hours is like, there's just some uncomfortableness. That way there is, when you're losing weight that quickly, you get aesthetic changes, which disturb people. And you also get loss of muscle mass, because weight is weight. And when the body's losing weight, it's losing all the weight. It's losing all the body parts. It's not just targeting the fat. So there's a lot of those kind of things that happen with it. And there's a lot of those that have implications in terms of our world as movement professionals. So
yes.
And you want to talk
100%.
through some of those.
Well, and also keep in mind that for some people, and a high percentage, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, headache, those are really big. I had one of my first clients Monday morning called, texted me, and she said, "I'm sorry, I can't come in. The nausea is way too bad this morning." And she's been on it for a while, and she usually doesn't have that bad by Monday. She takes it on Saturday. She said Sunday's really bad. Monday's a little less. Tuesday's a little less. And then slowly but surely it goes away during the week. But she just said, I just can't, not this morning. I tried eating and it made it so much worse. So nausea can be a huge thing. And, especially the diarrhea aspect as well. I've talked to a number of people. That is a big side effect. Loose stools become a big side effect. And there could be a lot of reasons for that, being, not only the drug aspect, but it's also nutrient aspect. What are they taking in? What are they not taking in? Nutrient wise.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
no, it's going to change
that
that.
can be a huge thing.
Yeah.
So
Change
those
the
are things,
microbiome and everything.
yeah. So those are things that you just need to be aware of, that these clients may or may not mention to you. Again, my clients talk to me about all these things. So, I'm sort of, they'll mention it, and it's always something I put in the back of my head, like, wow, that can be a huge issue for some people. A huge issue.
And that can keep people from taking it consistently or taking it for long periods of time. Because the other big challenge, and this was shown even from the very beginning, is that once people stop, they regain up to 70% of the weight that they lost or more, depending. I think at that point, the studies were pretty preliminary. So this is something where, like, are you going to commit to this forever? Which some people may feel like they have to commit to this forever. And then are they willing to put up with those side effects forever?
And that's the big
can
thing.
they tolerate it? Yeah.
There are so many people who are getting off of it, and because of the side effects is one. For some people, I've had a number of my clients not be able to get it. The drug is still not readily available.
It's not consistently enough.
Yeah, they get it for a while, and every year, something that I've learned with my own medications, I'm reactive hypoglycemic. So for a long time, I wore one of those glucose monitors because it really helped. Well, guess what? It has to be renewed. It has to be renewed on a regular basis. And if you don't get a hold of your doctor, or the doctor can't get approved through your insurance, and there's a process that everything has to go through. And this is one of those that, oh my gosh, the process can be intense for some clients. Even if it's for obesity, it can be intense, because some insurance companies are just saying, no, we're not covering it. You don't qualify. And they're making up the qualifications themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And
it's really expensive.
Incredibly expensive.
Right? I mean, I'm not sure what the ranges that I've seen are like, $900 to $2,000 a month.
Yeah, that's about $800 to $1,500 is about here. And I've got a number of clients. I live in an area that there is some wealth, Washington, D.C., and I have a number of clients who are just paying for it out of pocket. And that's just the way it is, because they want it badly enough and they're willing to do it, and they don't want to jump through all the hoops, or they've been turned down a number of times. And these are people who obviously whose BMI is high enough that they should be able to qualify. There's no reason they shouldn't be able to qualify. They have other issues, but their A1C isn't quite high enough. So guess what? We're not going to cover you. So
and that's a big issue. So again, it's an access situation where somebody who may need it may not be able to get it. And insurance companies are not that happy about paying for things that cost that much. They're just not. So any excuse they can have not to pay for you would be in their benefit. That's just how that works.
And there's something else to keep in mind about when you have a drug like this that can be difficult to get, when for whatever reason, the pharmacies in our area for about 3 months, you couldn't find it. So I had a number of clients actually have to go off of it. I had other clients seek out compounding pharmacies. Pharmacies basically who are given permission to create these drugs. But from everything I keep hearing, the standards aren't necessarily as tight as they should be.
That's what I hear too. Yeah.
And so are they getting the right thing? Are they getting too much of something? Are they getting not enough of something? I mean, we've all made a cake. We've all followed a recipe and we think we follow the recipe perfectly. And 5 people may follow the same recipe and 5 different things come out of that oven. So with a compounding pharmacy, you can only trust so much. And where's the quality control between one batch and a month from now being a different batch and a month from then being a different batch? Because I've heard horror stories about people who, went compounding pharmacies online and ended up getting very sick from it. One person, I read a story about someone who was hospitalized, because they just trusted. And let me tell you, there's a lot of companies doing it now. I don't know if you saw the ads during the Super Bowl, but for him and hers, those are really pushing, especially the hers. Have you noticed that? My wife last night said, okay, so they're pushing obesity drugs, they're pushing hair loss and anxiety medication. So basically you're making me anxious about my weight and my hair. And then you're going to give me anxiety drugs. Great. You're going to cover all 3. And it's true. I mean, they're really pushing it. And those are companies that are dealing with a lot of compounding pharmacies, from what I understand. And some of that may change as more are made by the manufacturers. Let's hope. I'm not a huge fan of, medication companies, pharmaceutical companies in general. However, I do believe that their quality control is usually a lot stronger and a lot tighter than some of these others are. So at least if you're getting something from, name the pharmaceutical company of your choice, you're going to be getting something that has been tested and tested and tested and is of the same quality assurance, which is nice.
Oh yeah, no, I mean they've got to cover their ass because their liability, they're a big target for a liability situation, and they've had many over the years. If you look at all the pharmaceutical issues, so they want to make sure that whatever they're taking out there is meeting the standards, and the FDA keeps it it keeps an eye on them. I'm not sure how close that eye is, but it keeps an eye on them for sure.
Yeah.
So when you think about this in terms of clients, when we think about working with people who are in this process of being on these drugs and losing a lot of weight, what are the ramifications in terms of exercise? And we've talked about this some before, but I think it's really important, for our audience to just talk about like what we see and how this relates to people's endurance, their strength, all those kind of things.
Sarcopenia is huge. You're going to lose muscle mass. No matter what, you're going to lose muscle mass. And I got to tell you, I've talked to many doctors who say, oh, if you're eating protein and you're exercising, you're going to keep all of your muscle. I'm sorry. You're losing water weight. Muscle is predominantly water. You're going to lose some of your muscle no matter what. That's just the way it is, even if you are lifting weights on a regular basis. However, you can limit the amount of muscle you lose by doing strength training. By continuing to exercise, you can limit some of that, but understand you're going to lose some. There's no doubt about it. You're going to lose some muscle mass.
If you're losing 34 pounds in 6 months, some of that's muscle. That's just how that is. And at a certain age, especially, it takes a lot to build muscle. I mean, I'm in my 60s now, and it's like, it didn't used to take me much to build muscle. I could just kind of think about it, work out for a few weeks, and things would change. That's no longer the case. Like just to maintain the muscle mass that I have without those takes a lot of work. So, clients who are not doing the work, and a lot of people aren't doing the work, they're just taking the drug and saying that's all they've got to do. That's the challenge. And the other thing too is the people that I know who go off this find that they go right back to their old habits.
Yes.
So unless they make a really substantial effort to, build up their exercise, change their diet, work on all that at the same time as they're going through this very disruptive medication process, it's really hard, I found, for people to transition off of these in any way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Partly because everything changes so radically on these drugs in terms of appetite, in terms of how much you can eat. It's like it's easy just not to eat, as you said.
Yep.
Whereas as soon as you go off the drugs, it's like the appetite goes up, the cravings go back up, and you're suddenly in that state of like, oh, yeah, that looks really delicious. Let's have some more of that. And I think there's a lot of that transitional psychology that's really difficult for people, as always is. I mean, everybody who's ever dieted has had this experience. But I think that makes it even harder with these drugs, where it's such a radical shift from one mindset to, 2 weeks later, a completely different mindset. And I think that makes it really hard to keep the weight off and stay on a track.
And keep something else in mind when it comes to losing muscle. If you do lose 50 pounds, in, let's say, a year, you go off the drug. Well, let's say when you lose that 50 pounds, part of that's going to be muscle, part of that's going to be fat. If you're lucky, it's more fat than muscle. But let's say you lose 20 pounds of muscle with that, but you go off the drug and you gain 50 pounds again. Do you think you're going to gain that 20 pounds of muscle back if you're not working out? Probably not. So what happens is you gain back more of the body fat, which is why yo-yo dieting for years, that was what was happening. People would lose weight. They lose both fat and muscle. But when they gained weight rapidly, they'd get predominantly fat. They'd have less muscle. Their metabolism slows down. Well, in this case, that's going to happen even more and more radically, because it's going to happen a lot faster, because people are losing weight faster. They're going to gain weight faster because they go right back to their old habits. And it can be very challenging to not want to eat when all of a sudden everything looks really, really good. And you're now feeding those hunger sensations, not only in your stomach, but also in your brain.
Right.
Now, something else to think about that I have a client who is 75 who went on Rybelsus. Rybelsus? Was that the one? The pill version, the first one. I'm trying to remember if it was Rybelsus or if it's something else. But it was the pill version of the GLP-1, and it worked for her. It worked wonders. It doesn't work for everybody, but it worked wonders for her. She was on it and on a smaller dose, but on it for over a year, and she's lost about 70 pounds. Now she is incredibly vain about her skin.
Yes. Yeah.
Because at 70, you don't have the same amount of elastin, collagen, and connective tissue that you did when you were 20, and things are hanging. And what we're seeing now, I don't know if you've heard about this, but there's now the so-called $20,000 body lift for people who have lost substantial weight, where you can go in and have a nip and tuck of everything. Yeah. And they're mainly doing it for the rich people and, people in their 30s and 40s. But I got to tell you, I've got clients in their 60s and 70s. Vanity doesn't go away just because you're a little older. Skin still bothers you. It still bothers you that you can still see that. And that's becoming something that is going to be in the marketplace a lot more. So don't be surprised if after your clients lose weight, if they start coming to you and asking you, hey, what do you think about doing this? Because I got to tell you, I've looked into it. I've lost a substantial amount of weight and I've got some excess skin. So I've looked into it. It is a very, very, very serious operation. And when they remove the skin and just sort of pull the skin together, they don't deal with the underlying issue or the underlying tissues. They're literally just cutting out and pulling together. And suddenly I've had some clients with this who have had range of motion restrictions, especially in their abdominals. They suddenly can't extend backwards because it's basically like everything's being pulled, holding tight and not being let to stretch. So keep that in mind. You may look good with your clothes on. You may look good when you stand still, but you also might see them have a lot restricted ranges of motion and things may not be able to move as freely as they once did. So just keep that in mind. You may start seeing clients come to you with some of these issues. It's only a matter of time.
I had a client a long time ago who actually had a breast cancer surgery, and they did a tram flap. So basically, to replace the breast tissue, they take essentially the rectus abdominis and kind of move it up under the skin to create the breast mound. And she was already a little kyphotic. And I was working with her both in movement and in manual therapy. And so I was really like my job, or my job as I saw it, was to keep those tissues moving. to keep that whole abdominal wall from scarring down so that it stopped moving. And I was not successful. I mean, we were moving, I saw her twice a week for Pilates and I saw her once a week for massage for about 3 months. And I think it made a difference, but then I didn't see her for about 6 months. Whew. And it was like, she literally could not stand up straight. She could not come out of that thoracic kyphosis because the scar tissue on the whole front of her abdomen was just gluing the skin down to the muscle layer underneath it, and would not allow her to go to that range of motion. And that was a small area, when I think about, and I just was talking to another client who had basically, she had three hernias, and so sort of mesh everywhere. Yeah, it was really kind of funky. And for her, like that resulted in a lot of pain in a lot of areas because those myofascial layers, we've talked about this in our fascia sections, are not gliding anymore. The skin is not gliding appropriately over the muscles stick down to each other, and that creates pain. I mean, when fascia doesn't glide, it can be painful. And that's, certainly when somebody decides they're going to get a whole body lift, or they're going to basically take a nip and tuck and just kind of tailor the skin suit to match the underlying tissue. Again, it can look good. It doesn't always work all that well.
And keep in mind that a lot of times, and you hear this with people who go in for breast implants, you hear this with people who go in for different types of, tummy tucks and everything. They always want more. And unless you have a conservative doctor, there's a reason why certain actors and actresses, you look at them and you think, man, they really haven't, they don't look like they've aged that much. If they've had work done, they've had good work. And they say that they've had a lot of good work done. They haven't had radical work done. A lot of people, because they're paying this one time, they want as much done as possible. And they want as much fat removal as possible. They want to be as flat in their stomach as possible. But that is what's going to cause that super tightness that you're going to find. Your skin can only stretch so much before it says, no, you're not going any further.
Yep.
So again, a little goes a long way. Be conservative with this kind of stuff, because we've seen it with people who have had breast, augmentation after breast cancer.
Yep.
And we see a lot of, suddenly they're kyphotic and they're having a hard time stretching, and it takes forever to get them to move. And just imagine now that's going to be throughout more areas of the body. So just keep that in mind, that we're going to be seeing that, and people are going to be asking you your opinion on it. So, you have to be able to say, here are the positives and here are the negatives, because as we said just a week or two ago, when we were talking about, some doctors may not share all of the information. They may not tell you some of the negatives of what might happen. So look into that as well. Highly, highly recommend. Yeah.
So when you think about working with clients who are on these, a lot of it is really like, I think of keeping them moving for sure.
Yep.
I also really encourage them to have a home program. So whatever it is, like I actually want them working out a little bit more than they were before, partly because I want to maintain as much muscle mass as I can. And this also means, like from a Pilates perspective, I want them to be doing some simple standing or some squats and some lunges. If they're willing to do some weight work, I'll have them do some weight work, or I'll just give a little more resistance in the Pilates studio, because I really, again, I want muscle mass to be maintained as much as possible throughout this process. And that's challenging because you get fatigue, you get, again, digestive issues that make it uncomfortable. And particularly, if the stomach's unhappy, they don't want to do abdominals because it's like, right? So I often have to be creative in terms of how to get the whole body strengthened without really irritating what's kind of bothering them, and the areas that they just look at you like, I don't want to do those exercises today because they hurt or they don't feel comfortable.
Now I'm going to tell you about another side effect that I've noticed with a number of clients. Okay, I've tried to look it up in the data and nothing's really popped out, but I've seen this with 5 different clients. So something's telling me that there's something to it. But what I've been seeing is people who have normal to low heart rates, their heart rates are higher when they're taking it. And we're not talking about just 1 or 2 beats per minute. We're talking about significant. One client that I work with, we could do walking lunges up and down the hallway, and she might maybe get to 119 beats a minute, 120, maybe. Okay. As soon as she started taking this, she's in the 140s.
Wow. So you go from
And she
zone 2
says
to zone 3.
And
or
she
zone
says it's
4. Yeah.
uncomfortable because just imagine if you're used to your heart rate, anybody who's had
Yeah.
irregular heart rate or something, you don't even notice your heart beating. And all of a sudden when it's irregular, you can hear it. And oh my gosh, what am I feeling?
It's
Well, that's what she
disturbing.
felt. It felt disturbing. And she said, I don't know what's going on. I feel like I might have an irregular heartbeat. And the doctor said, no, it's just elevated. Even at rest, she went from being in the low 50s to being 65 to 70. And while that may not seem like a big jump, that was a big jump for her, that she kept feeling like it was uncomfortable for a while, but she really had to start monitoring her cardio to not overdo it, because she found she got out of breath so much faster. She was in that next zone, and she's in her late 50s. So, she was definitely pushing her threshold. And we have to watch and give her more rest between sets. We have to make sure that she's keeping that heart rate within, proper range for her and not going overboard, because it does feel uncomfortable. And it's a range that she didn't get into hardly ever before. So it was very uncomfortable. And I've got a number of clients, male in their 60s and 70s, who start taking the drug and they're noticing an elevated heart rate. And I say, you got to talk to your cardiologist. Let's make sure that this is not an issue, because we don't want to take a chance, especially if I'm working you and now we're working at the same rate that we were before, but suddenly we're pushing your anaerobic threshold by doing something like squats or standing up and sitting down, but we're pushing that threshold, and that may be uncomfortable for you and your cardiologist may not like it. I need to know as a fitness professional where to keep you safe. So this is something, just keep that in mind, that you may hear this with some clients. And if they start saying, yeah, I think my heart rate is elevated, have them talk to their doctor. Just make sure it's okay. Make sure that it's okay.
That's some really good advice, because I haven't heard that either. One other thing, Brian, do you see the couple of people that I've talked to said that they get really lightheaded too? That they just have moments like I think I did some blood pressure things, at least for some of my clients as well. So just transitioning from supine to standing or sitting to standing, I'm just a lot more kind of right there with them when they're going from the ground up to the reformer, or they're coming off the reformer and they've been supine for a while. I'm just a little cautious about that, because a lot of them seem to get pretty just loopy. And a little lightheaded.
And there could be a lot of reasons for that. It could be blood pressure, obviously, but it could just be also not taking in enough nutrients. And that's something else I wanted to cover.
Right.
Is if they're not taking in the proper amount of nutrients, I have a couple who are beginning to cramp like crazy. They never had cramps before, but now their calves, hamstrings, anytime we even just do gentle bridging, it's killing them. And we have to stretch out way before we do any of this stuff, just so they can do certain exercises. And, something that I'm going to say is, you need to talk to either a nutritionist or your doctor. They're probably going to suggest a good multivitamin, something that's going to help boost that. I have a couple of clients who are starting to take more greens type of thing. There's Grunes, there's athletic greens. There's all these different supplements on the market that can help get you some nutrients if you're not taking in as much. Because remember, something people don't think about, when you can't take in as many calories because your stomach, you obviously feel fuller faster, you need to take in your proteins first. If you don't, and fill up on, let's say you go out and you fill up on bread and you have 2 pieces of bread and now you can't eat your protein. Well, guess what? If you're not eating enough protein, that can affect your muscle. You may lose more muscle. You're not taking in enough protein. That's number 1. Number 2, vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, all of those are going to hit you like a lead weight. And they're just going to sit there, and suddenly you can't eat anything else during the meal. You have 4 bites of salad and suddenly, oh my gosh, it's taking up all the space. I'm full already. So then they stop avoiding taking in the vegetables so they could take in their proteins first, which they are normally told to do. Nutritionists will often say, take in your proteins first. So now they're not taking in as many vegetables. So now they need to buffer that through nutritional supplementation of some sort. So I highly, highly, highly recommend that they get their blood work done annually so they can see if there is anything that they're missing. So they can
or more frequently if they can. I mean,
or more frequently.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Annually. I mean, between the beginning of, like, let's say you take GLP-1s starting in March, and you don't get your blood done until October or November, you can miss some funky things along the way there.
And you could have a serious deficit. Iron, we're seeing a huge deficit in. Magnesium, we're seeing a deficit in. Vitamin D, huge deficit. So these are things that you kind of want to think about. Even vitamin A, believe it or not, vitamin A is one of those that most people don't even think about. But we're seeing deficits in these things, the fat soluble vitamins. So keep that in mind, that nutrient dense food is always going to be recommended. And if you think about it, ConAgra has come out with their GLP-1, diet plan, foods that you can get in the freezer section that are basically nutrient dense. So you're taking this and now you have to eat more calories per meal. It almost seems backwards, but what they're talking about is you want nutrient dense. You want foods that are going to give you as much nutrients as possible, not necessarily calories and not necessarily high amounts of carbs, fats. You want more of the nutrients. So like I say, I've had a couple clients ask me about athletic greens or Grunes or any of these green supplements. And I say, please take it. It's something easy that you can add to your diet. As long as the doctor says it's okay, as long as your nutritionist, whoever you're working with, says it's okay, please, by all means, and supplement it with anything that you find you're missing. And
I would say, Brent, the underlying thing on that is that if somebody's going to commit to weight loss, and you know this, and I know this as well. If someone's going to commit to weight loss, it's like, and you do start down the GLP-1 path. The other thing I've heard too is like people's appetite, their appetite doesn't just go down, it changes radically. So things they liked before, they don't like now. So things they used to eat all the time, they don't want to eat now. So sometimes people really do end up, I think about some of my nieces when they were little, like I call it the white food diet, right? One of my nieces ate basically pasta and French fries for about 3 years. Like that was all, salt and pasta and French fries, all she would eat. And sometimes that happens with people on GLP-1s, and then that leads to nutrient deficiencies. It also, if you think about it, and I think one of the things that occurs to me, and I'm certainly working with this on a few clients, is if you know you're going to transition off this at some point, consider that from the moment you start taking it. Like start working towards changing your habits in terms of eating, or at least thinking about your habits in terms of eating, thinking about your habits in terms of exercise, and really prepare yourself if you decide you're going to do this for 3 or 6 months to try to lose 20 or 30 pounds, whatever you're trying to do. And then really do think about consciously how you're going to make that transition. And I'm hoping, I haven't seen a lot of it, but I'm hoping that more and more like nutritionists and health coaches generally really take on that role of I'm your transition person from here to here, because that can be the most, not just challenging, because I think it's challenging psychologically. I think it's also just challenging logistically. How much do I eat? When do I eat? How much do I exercise? But it's also then how do you maintain that as you go forward? Because one thing that I know from working with 1 million clients over the years is, you feel so great. You've lost that 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds, whatever, like you feel so great. And then you go off the drug or you go off the whatever, and it starts to creep up again. And that psychological trauma that happens with that is kind of intense, that ups and downs, and that like I succeeded and now I'm failing again. And there's a big part of that too, that I think, anybody who takes on that role of kind of a GLP-1 transition coach would be a really useful skill. And if you work with a lot of clients like that, I know Brian does, that's something to think about, is how do you work people through that transition, and even start that transition when they start on the drug.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
If you look at bariatric surgery, no matter what type you have, there is a process that you have to go through. It's not as though you can go in and say, you know what, I'm ready to do it, let's go. No,
Right.
6 months to a year process where you have to meet with a nutritionist every so often. You need to change your habits significantly. There are all these things that you have to do, even see a psychologist. There are things that you have to do in order to qualify before the state and before the insurance company are willing to pay for, a very expensive surgery. It's in order to retrain you, because there are a lot of people who, if you didn't see a nutritionist, would go back to eating their old habits. I'm friends with a bariatric doctor, and he said he was wondering why one of his patients wasn't losing. After all of this, he lost initially like 20 pounds, but this guy had a lot of weight to lose and couldn't figure out, why is he not losing? Well, guess what? Every day he ate one large meat lover's pizza.
Ooh.
But that's all he ate all day. So he would start in the morning and he would eat a piece or two, as much as his stomach could hold, and then he'd stop. An hour or two later, he'd eat another piece or two. And he'd do that throughout the day. And pretty much every few hours, he was eating several hundred calories. Well, guess what? Of course, he's not going to lose weight doing that.
Calories are, to some extent, I mean, I don't entirely agree that calories are calories, but sometimes calories are calories.
Yeah.
If you're eating 4,000 calories a day, you probably won't lose weight.
And that's just it.
Yeah. Wow.
And yet, so you need to change those habits. Now,
yeah,
the extent of GLP-1s is like going into a bariatric surgeon and saying, okay, let's do the surgery tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because suddenly
exactly.
you have an immediate reaction to the drug. And when that reaction hits, you no longer have your appetite. You can't eat as much. Everything changes. However, unlike bariatric surgery, down the road, your stomach may stretch out a little bit, sure, but it's not going to go back to the way it was. But as soon as you stop these drugs, your habits, if you haven't changed them, will go back to the way they were. I wish that more doctors would take this seriously and say, okay, or insurance companies, no problem. You want to go on this drug? Fine. Here's the program that you need to do.
Right. Here's your pre, here's your post. Yeah.
Because if you don't make those changes and substantive changes, they need to be big changes, or else you're going to go right back to your old habits. And that can be, like you said, it's psychologically damaging, because for someone who has a hard time losing weight, all of a sudden they're losing weight like crazy. It's like, hee, yay, everything's working great. My body's working again. And then all of a sudden, oh my gosh, I'm gaining. I'm a failure. I'm a loser. And that can be a downward spiral psychologically, which can often lead to more excessive eating.
Right. And to your point earlier too, it's like, if you lose a lot of weight relatively quickly, which these do, and then you go off of them and you replace some of that lost weight, some of which was muscle, with more fat cells, and then your metabolism goes down, then you're in a spiral, which is, it's the typical yo-yo dieting spiral. It's just, you just lose a little more weight. It's a little more dramatic. Instead of being a slow, steady down and then a slow, steady up, it's like down and then, oh, boom, let's pop back up. Yep. And it gets down to the same thing that I think you've said a million times. I've said a million times, losing weight is not, there's no magic. There's no magic. GLP-1s will give you a substantial step up and make things more efficient. But if you're looking at the long term, you've still got to deal with some other issues. And if you think about how much it literally turns off the addiction switch, like, I'm sure you've had a few clients who've gone off them, as have I. It's like, and they turn back on that addiction switch.
Oh yeah.
Wow. It's like, woohoo, I'm free to be do all the bad things I was doing before and more. Yep. So that's really, because so much of this does have a psychological component. Like, that's really where the preparation and the transition are super important. Because when your brain says I'm hungry, you feed it. That's what happens.
Yep. And we have to really think about this as being a lifelong drug for those people who are willing to commit to it. Because there are people who do need this. There are 100% people whose metabolism isn't working the way it should. I have a client who was eating perfectly, exercising 3 to 4 times a week, and yet her weight would not budge whatsoever. And she tried Ozempic, did not work. She's also A1C, relatively high, diabetic, not huge. We're not talking, she has like 20 pounds to lose, not 200 pounds. But she's petite with 20 pounds to lose. It really shows on her, and she's uncomfortable with it. She went on Zepbound or Mounjaro, and immediately it started to work. Now, there's something else to keep in mind, something that's being tested. It's called microdosing, which is a much smaller dose. And that's what she's doing, because the larger doses cause too many side effects. But with the smallest dose possible, it's less than a therapeutic dose. She's still noticing great weight loss. And don't know about the A1C yet. She's going to be tested in the next few months. I can't wait to see that, to see if it does come down, because it didn't on Ozempic, but this one might. So we're sort of crossing our fingers here, hoping it does. But yeah, so microdosing is something else to keep in mind. And maybe that's going to be the key to getting people off of, their higher dose of whatever the drug that is. Maybe that's a way to transition people, much like
or long-term maintenance.
Right.
Maybe instead of kind of, this radical thing, you just, and I think one of the nice things from a scientific perspective about so much data and so many people taking this and so many different, genetic situations interacting with it is they can start to say, okay, this works, this doesn't work. Here's a way to do this. Here's a way to play with this. And I know, because this is a gigantic market, there's a huge financial incentive for the drug companies to figure out how to make this more tolerable, more affordable, more accessible to more people, because, some like 70% of Americans are overweight at this point or something like that. There's a, huge percentage. And so if there's a way that we can manage some of that changes our health outcomes, it changes all kinds of things. So, the good news is there's been huge changes just in this year since we last talked about this. There's a lot of new drugs on the market. There's
be a lot more.
In the next 3 to 5 years, it's this whole landscape will be complete. We'll have to revisit this once a year, basically, because things are changing so quickly.
There's supposedly 3 new drugs coming out, 2 by Eli Lilly, that are supposedly could be game changers in even a bigger sense, because preliminary studies are showing that the weight loss on these outdoes everything else on the market right now. And one of them is oral. So it's not injectable.
It's not injectable, which is a big deal.
Which is a huge deal. They're finding that it's not as stable. So they're working on that. But once they figure that out, it can be a huge game changer. So like you said, we're going to have to revisit this every year or two, because it's going to continue to change. However, what our job is will probably continue to be as coach, confidant, helping people, guide them through what they may not be getting if they're not seeing a nutritionist, if they're not seeing someone who they should be. I highly recommend. But look, we can always recommend making sure you're getting in enough nutrients. Make sure your doctor is doing your blood work. If you're missing something, add a supplementation, figure out what you're missing and see if you can get those nutrients in your body. Exercise, weight-bearing exercise, any type of weight training. Let's limit the amount of muscle loss and sarcopenia. Those are all things that we can do as fitness professionals, and we should. And even you Pilates instructors out there, weight training is very important. You can use your body weight. You don't have to necessarily go out and buy kettlebells. I mean, you don't have to. You can. They're out there. But doing something that's going to really help promote muscle gain and reducing muscle loss, very important.
And one thing you said that I just want to bring up again, because this has been a little bit of a sub theme, I think, here is, and I forget this sometimes, we are often the primary health related person somebody's seeing, right? I mean, as a Pilates teacher, I saw somebody 2 or 3 times a week for months on end. And their doctor might see them every 6 months. They might see them every year. They might see them, way less than that. If they're seeing a physical therapist or something like that, they may see them for 4, 6, or 8 sessions, and then they're not going to see them again.
Yep.
So we often are the person who can notice things like, oh, you're cramping a whole lot more than you used to. You may want to go and just get your electrolytes checked out or do supplementation or something, right? So it's kind of like there's roles that we can play very simply and very just in terms of monitoring the situation, seeing where they're going, giving them advice, and referring them to people we think can help them if they're having issues with it.
Yep.
And I think all those are just an important role as an adjunct health professional, right? We're not a PT, we're not a doctor,
Nope.
whatever, but we are often that first line of seeing somebody's habits. Like I think you're noticing your client's heart rate was like 10 to 20 beats elevated. That's significant.
That's significant.
Right. Something's going on cardiovascularly there. That's different. Right. And for some people that's fine. And they can tolerate that. And for some people that's like, oh, that we got to watch you because, you've had a bypass or you've got some cardio issues anyway, like those are things that we're going to be the first line of in terms of seeing some of those changes.
And that is huge.
Yeah.
That is something that we should not take lightly. I call us secondary medical professional. We're not the primary care. We're secondary care. We're the ones that they will see on a regular basis. I mean, how many people see their primary care physician more than once or twice a year? Hardly anybody.
Yeah, unless
hardly anybody
really going on, you don't usually. And you see them for 15 minutes and they kind of go, yeah, you're fine.
If you're lucky.
I mean,
right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And if you don't ask the right questions, they just are going to look at a chart and say, well, you're losing weight. This looks good. All right, keep up the good work.
Right.
Whereas we're the ones that are going to notice the smaller changes, like the cramping, like the heart rate, like the fatigue. Maybe they are suffering more GI distress, but they don't want to get off the drugs. So they don't want to talk to their doctor about it because they're afraid they'll be pulled off. Things like that we can say, you know what? I really think you need to talk to your doctor.
Yep.
And I think they may be able to modify.
Maybe there's a different dosage for you. A lot of new things are coming out, like just encouraging them to take care of themselves.
Or side effects with other drugs they're taking, statins, blood pressure meds, things like that may not work right. Guess what? This other blood pressure medication may work better with that. So that's what the medical professional is there for, but it's our job to help point them in the right direction sometimes and push them into, hey, you really need to see somebody.
Yeah. So that's hopefully that, I don't know, hopefully that gave you some new insights, right? Because again, most of us are dealing with this, understanding the side effects, understanding how that affects them as movers, understanding how that affects potentially their exercise and their physical health in that kind of way. And then understanding kind of our role in it. And then I also encourage you to just keep up with the science. I know when I was more in regular practice, clients would always come to me, it's like, oh, my doctor's got me on a new drug and it's this for something, whether it's a new anti-inflammatory, which I was more interested in because that's directly what I do, or whether it was a new cardiac medication. I'm like, I'd at least look it up and just see if there's anything I needed to know from a mover's perspective about what the negative side effects of that drug might be. And GLP-1s are like, there's massive side effects that directly affect what we do and how we work with clients.
Yeah. Anytime. And something to keep in mind, your client will tell you about a GLP-1. They may not tell you about if they're put on a new statin or a blood pressure med, or if those are changed.
Yes.
Hopefully everybody talks about these things when a client comes in for their first session and they're doing their assessment. However, they rarely check in again and say, are you still only taking, you were taking such and such. Are you still, oh no, he put me on something else and I'm taking a much larger dose. Okay. Good for us to know, because if someone suddenly gets pushed to a beta blocker, for instance, and their heart rate is changing and we're trying to train them in a certain zone, well, guess what? Now that zone is going to be much different. So it's just keep up with their meds. Like I said, they're going to talk to you about the GLP-1s, but keep up with their meds as well. Just in general.
Yeah. And if you don't understand all that, then find a good medical professional to help you out. Like ask if you got a good doctor friend, if you got a PT friend, if you got somebody who knows something, And I don't always recommend Dr. Google on that, although that has been my resource many times. But at this point, I've read through enough studies to know, okay, that's not good. That's not good. That's not good. That seems like, NIH funded study on blah, blah, blah. I can probably believe that. Anyway, hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. Just to update you on current state of the industry and this particular piece of it. It's been great.
Yeah. So hopefully you learned something, and hopefully when the client comes to you and asks you about it, or the clients that are coming to you already talking about it, you'll have a little bit more information and maybe be, armed with a little bit more that you can talk to them about and ask the right questions, especially when it comes to heart rate, especially when it comes to nausea and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully we've given you more information that you didn't know, and just something that we think we need to talk about every now and then, because it is going to affect our industry quite a bit.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it. As always, hit that like and subscribe button, and do us a favor, please like, subscribe, comment, all those things, post, reshare, all that kind of stuff. We really appreciate it. You can always get in touch with us at movingconvos@gmail.com. Check us out on Instagram at Moving Convos. And for Nora St. John, I'm Brian Ritchie. We'll talk to you later.
Bye, guys.